Barry and Yvonne, isn't it? Barry and Yvonne, and they're still there today. It's a nice place. It's a lovely old farmhouse. And in the book, when the 6 lads are staying there in the middle of the night, I have to use the loo. So I get up in the middle of the night to use the loo. Anyway, Simeon was awakened by bladder pressure. All the tea and milky coffee had finally taken its toll, and called to the young man from that distant, cosy, mysterious otherworld of deep slumber. Unwillingly, slowly he came to consciousness. He disentangled himself from the comfortable arms of Morpheus and, in pitch darkness, fumbled and staggered out in search of the bathroom. Desperately trying to be as silent as that dark night, he navigated along an alarmingly creaky complication of steps up, steps down, and acute, confusing angles before very gratefully reaching his destination. Simeon stood before the bowl and breathed a long, deep sigh of blessed easement. He'd never read a word of Shakespeare, but he could easily have quoted Francisco the soldier, who said, of course, "For this relief, much thanks." The old house was still warm from the heat of the day. Simeon, clad only in underpants, was not cold. As he returned to retrace his steps, sudden alarm. His exit was blocked by a dark form who had stealthily crept out of the deeper shadows. Any fear which had initially gripped the startled lad was short-lived when faint starlight silhouetted the familiar profile of the friend. In the few moments of tense silence which followed, eager eyes and mouth-watering lust scanned down an adolescent trunk to take in the exciting view of an urgent and demanding manhood. Hardened by desire, the unsmiling, unfriendly face gave an unspoken command. Deal with it. He didn't know or appreciate it at the time, but Simeon would eventually look back over the years and view those early delicious and relatively innocent teenage moments as the real thing. The real thing was true ecstasy in stark contrast to the more contrived and planned experiences of adulthood. Natural rough lads, rough-hewn from a coal mining community, were totally masculine. Totally 100% butch. Butch as the hard bricks which built Heanor. So very different to the many anonymous touches which would follow in later years. Touches becoming repellent, when later identified as ministrations from the old, the soft, the slimy, the artificial, the affected, the effeminate, the sophisticated and the piss elegant. Nothing could compete with those secret snatch moments of early teens, those forbidden fondles born of a playful growth. Quick opportunities of a stealthy touch arose out of a chance meeting of 2 boys in the changing room, the toilet, or any quiet secluded corner of the school. Any shame was eclipsed by the physical excitement of hot blood and desperate need to reach a climax at the hand of another. Any concern was eclipsed by the unspoken assurance that any such illegal and immoral incident would never be mentioned or even whispered again. Such moments of pure ecstasy would, like this precious moment, begin and end in silence. In silence, the 2 boys returned to their beds, never to speak of it again, and once more to sleep. Some hours later, it was a noise, a soft noise out of the silence of the night and very close. Simeon saw 2 eyes staring at him, eyes deep set into dark fur. To gauge the distance, a small head moved sideways before an athletic liquid body leapt from the half-open window onto the bed, skillfully and silently landing with no more impact than a gentle kiss. The drowsy welcome lasted for just a few strokes and a few contented purrs before both boy and cat were fast asleep. In Scruffy Chicken, I described 3 camps. There's the Darby Camp, the Nottingham Camp, and the third camp. Now the Darby Camp and the Nottingham Camp were basically made of professional gentlemen, people that had plenty to lose, and so there was a lot of snobbery. The third camp, of course, was, as I say, everybody else. We'll get onto that. Well, people like Jasper and Mr. Toad, who you'll meet in a moment. So this takes place in the Derby Turkish Bath, and this is a person, a real person, who, of course, I don't give his real name, but is a real person. And Simeon is sitting next to this particular gentleman, and this gentleman's ignoring Simeon. Because, of course, Simeon's just a scruffy chicken. Scruffy means not just scruffy in appearance, but scruffy accent, scruffy education, and scruffy in many other ways. And that was me. But anyway, I tried to engage this man in conversation. Simeon was regarded with supreme insouciance, which became slightly irritating. Accordingly, he attempted conversation. "I like your car." After quite a long pause, the deathly white face slowly turned to assess the young speaker. With legal precision, one sharp word was delivered with cut glass quality. "Indeed." "Oh, yeah. Hey, it's the new 1300 Vanden Plough, isn't it? Oh, neat, that expensive-looking conservative colour. Lovely posh leather, nice wooden finish. All such good taste. I was admiring it when tying up my bike to the lamppost outside." "Bicycle? How quaint," came the concise reply, pregnant with derision. "Oh, it's well equipped for a small car," continued the boy with enthusiasm, trying to ignore the put down. "Oh, switches and buttons everywhere, an automatic transmission. Very few English cars have got automatic transmission. We have everything except money." Some people in here know what I'm talking about. This last line of 5 condescending words, carefully enunciated with subtle sarcasm, was offensive to Simeon. And yet for the following 40 years he remembered and admired those words as much as he genuinely admired the Vanden Plough. Apart from the clear implication that Clarence was heading off a request for money, Simeon was enormously impressed with the way this gentleman had pronounced that one word, money. It was drawn out to about 10 times its normal length. It sounded like money. And in stark contrast to Simeon's working class money, he must have heard aristocrats speaking on the BBC Home Service saying money thousands of times, but to hear it live directly from the mouth of a real person, or should I say an unreal person, was a striking experience indeed. Clarence Soames was side of Lake Michigan. Somewhere in the dunes, Simeon fished out, as Gary would term, one of your freaks. This turned out to be a screaming little black queen known as Bum Bum, who frequently referred to himself as this lady. From Simeon's point of view, shaking with laughter, the introduction was a huge success. There was poor Gary of stony countenance sitting on his towel on the main beach, helplessly watching this attention-grabbing hullabaloo, a one-queen mini-circus. Bun Bun danced and pranced around him, wriggling his backside, thrusting out his already prominent begging buttocks, yelling out in a thick accent, "Yeah, babe, you is some sweet meat. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Hunky, hunky, yeah, tasty hunky. Ooh, this lady, she's hungry. Yeah, this lady is one hot slut. Bun Bun ready for action. She want filling, yeah, ooh, ooh, ooh." The outrageous trollop continued to caper and orbited Gary's towel about 3 more times in his bizarre war dance come love dance pre-sex ritual. Diplomacy was the only defence. Bun Bun was thanked for his kind interest, but this particular hunk was resting after a busy morning combing the dunes. Perhaps some other time. I taught Matlock Bath. I love Matlock Bath, as you gather. And I think that those caves and everything, there's a lot of I don't know what the word is, you could make a lot of it.
Potential.
Potential, thank you, potential, yeah, a lot of potential, caves in there. Anyway, Guzzly Grandad was visited by the police because of the missing boy, as several others, and they went to have a word with him. About to wield the usual official knock, John was slightly restrained, that's the sidekick, by his senior, who deliberately gave the door a more gentle, furtive knock. From within they heard, "You can come in, can't you?" Entering, they were enveloped by a musty smell, something between sweaty socks, ashtrays and damp, beer-stained carpet. Dark, pre-war tatty wallpaper was the backdrop to a mangy old sofa pressed down by a pile of human blubber, which comprised the ample, odious, unclean person of Guzzly Grandad. Simultaneously, both visitors saw how he came to be called Guzzly Grandad. Attention was drawn at once to a slimy, toothless orifice surrounded by grey stubble. Oozing slobber, this repulsive, glistening cavity was loosely contained by uncouth, crooked lips. The sight of the two hunky men touched off a Pavlovian conditioned reflex. A salacious tongue stealthily, very stealthily, crept up from the blackness of the thick throat and slowly, lasciviously, moved side to side, making the lower lip viscous in an unspoken, lewd invitation. It was the one word police, which immediately shut down all these wanton succulent secretions and closed the old man's mouth into an expression of alarm and dismay. His voice was coarse, deep and guttural. "Well, I've not done out, have I?" The total impression was one of a mess. Unshaven, he was reposed in a once white, collarless, soot-stained shirt. His braces were hauling up at near nipple level, ancient baggy trousers, grubby trousers. At his feet a growing pile of orange peel and nutshells. By his side the remains of supper, greasy chip papers. Partly under the sofa was noticed the edge of a dinner plate with even older food. And this is really my first visit to his place, and I describe it as follows. Anyway, it's a small room, very Derbyshire, had a comfortable, quaint simplicity, darkened by small, heavily curtained windows. A blazing fire shot out a cheerful, warm, orange illumination. "Nice fire," complimented Simeon. "Could be better. I must say here, Herbert, his real name, or let's call him by his stage name, Betsitch Betty, he'd got a mobile mouth. It seemed to go all round his face, like that, all round his face. And hideous face. Anyway, could be better. Woodside Ards. It's a cheap type of coal, local coal. Like trying to burn bloody slate. Grey as my granny's hair. Now that loose bitch next door, she gets Derby Brights. That's the best coal. And she gets it for note. Now this last precipitated a tirade against Betty's neighbours and his personal assessment of the social scene of Lower Betsitch Lane. You can imagine in those days that there wouldn't be a lot of tolerance for a man who was known to be homosexual and as outrageous as Betty. "She stands need to go on about my morals. She's had bloody Coleman, dustman, she's no for a tart, dirty cow. She's had more prick than a second-hand dartboard. Criticising me. I cut off all heads of daffodils, that's what I've done. That'll learn. They're calling me to that dotty bug at the other side, you know, him as keeps piddling his bloody dotty toes. And they're filthy kids. They run round with their knickers dropping down, and that fat lass that stinks, one tooth black, one wobbling. Hey, what's up with him?" Well, I was laughing actually. Once again, Simeon was trembling with laughter. Even his much-loved Auntie Gertie, a leading character in Horsley Woodhouse, couldn't have equalled such a performance. The boy, however, took note. Betsitch Betty, when crossed, was dangerous, was capable of a spiteful act, vandalising the garden of a neighbour. But the old queen ranted on. "Can't keep her bloody legs closed." Simeon was suitably shocked. "Big family, yeah, it's all ignorant as pigs. She feeds them boiled bones, you know. Oh, aye, little and in chair like a bloody monkey. He's enjoying them bones, she says. Grandma sitting there all bloody day, daft old bugger, 3 sheets to wind, red face, piddling scabs on her legs, veins sticking out, 6 bloody chins. Sworn enemy of Nottingham. And this is what I saw. These are my impressions. Anyway, the conversation had turned to an absentee who had just obtained his PhD. I suppose we shall have to call him Dr. Fisher now, laughed a man with a sickly grin. It is unlikely we need be so formal, replied Hoadley nonchalantly, as he carefully removed a tiny speck from his immaculate sleeve. After all, it is a degree in engineering, and from a university which can hardly command our full esteem. This resulted in an eager row of nodding heads, each wearing a simpering smile, each uttering disparaging, sardonic, no, yes, Hoadley's right, of course, oh yes, quite so, Claude, yes, carry on. Dr. Fisher was an infrequent attender of the Friary. This is all taking place in the Friary in Derby. It was a very posh hotel in those days, and to get in there was quite an achievement. I mean, I was only just allowed in there. I was taken by somebody else. Anyway, Friday night at the Friary. He could only be considered an associate member. If he'd read the classics from Oxford University instead of Sheffield University, if he had not dared to challenge Hoadley, albeit ever so mildly, about the late Dr. Fisher, might have been treated with more respect. Claude Hoadley hated America and anything American. Nevertheless, Britain's rapid decline as a major industrial power and the significance of a comment which belittled the practical subject of engineering at a northern university entirely escaped the lowly Derbyshire teenager, who was in awe of an extraordinary accent. If David's cut-glass diction had been impressive, this orgy of enunciation, such high art of lavish articulation, hit the boy's Derbyshire ear like a thunderbolt. 2 words in particular were drawn out with striking embellishment. After became very southern, sounding like after, and command was elongated, a bit like Ron's money. Oh, sorry. To command. Simeon Hogg began to absorb the subtle middle-class values which were being communicated to him from that group of professional homosexuals on that first evening. Members of the club were encouraged to appear to be at all times inwardly assured, stable, smug, even arrogant. Simeon was experiencing culture shock. Unlike in the United States, here in Derby, discussion of money was considered vulgar. Unearned privilege was admired, and American pushiness deplored. Steered by Hoadley, the conversation meandered around the various subjects, but the correct code of conduct came out loud and clear. Manual work, technical skills, people in trade, self-made types and all manner of doers were to be despised by these nodding heads. And years later, Simeon would reflect that sad Derby elite, who of oppressed people, of oppressed people, who to make their own position safer felt the need to denigrate other human beings regarded as inferior. That's the... When I had a terrible experience at Monday Street Boys School, which is just along the, was it that way? Just I can't remember there, Monday Street, that way, yeah. That was dreadful. But then I went down to Howitt School, down the hill, Oscar Road, and I had a wonderful experience there. And one of the reasons it was wonderful is because I was befriended by the most powerful boy in the school there. His real name was Horace. He doesn't live very far away from here at all. And in this book I call him Scott North. But we went out together. We went on the River Derwent quite a lot of times. He always rowed, and I was very happy to be with him. It was a privilege to be with him, and my esteem in that school went right up because of being with him. Anyway, one day they ended up rowing a boat on the Derwent deep down inside a heavily wooded, green and dank rocky ravine in a soup of delicious air, thick with the scent of ramsons. Girly giggles from aloft floated down through the sun-glinting ferns, causing them to look up to see two wenches giving friendly waves. Simeon, embarrassed and awkward, was relieved when his companion, panting and struggling with oars, gave an appropriate Heanor-style response. "I've got energy for you, Duck, but not for this." High summer endured, day after day, and mid-July saw the same two friends on that same river just north of the Belper River Gardens. In that gentle, civilised lost world of Kenneth Graham, after the style of Rat and Mole, they drifted under the willows, enjoying the mottled, reflected sunshine, under the riverside foliage, and heard the friendly Derwent rhythmically lapping their little boat. Simeon Hogg was fully aware of the total magic and enchantment of that long summer, and fully aware that it could not last. It was all held together by Howitt, the friends and friendship, and the stage upon which to perform. Like an utterly unknown blackness, leaving day was remorselessly approaching, followed by the chill wind of autumn. Soon Simeon would be unwillingly creeping away from school. Overhead, the occasional flash of white from magpies, and the dank, nostalgic scent of tiny, starred wild garlic from the bank. The passenger looked affectionately at the happy golden oarsman, laughing and splashing, and thought, "It'll never get better than this." And you know what? Never did. On my last bit, and you all breathe a huge sigh of relief. David has kindly invited all of us back to his bungalow, which is just down the road.
A mile down the road, opposite the old American Adventure, and I've laid a buffet on.
So you're all welcome if you would like to go to David's bungalow, which is a lovely bungalow, and he's made lots of nice.
No, nice scones.
Yes, there's some scones.
Can you park?
Pardon? You can park on Pit Lane. You can park on the half on the road, half on the pavement. Yeah.
Down on the main road where you are?
Yes, you can park on the pavement. It's a wide pavement, everybody does, up against the hedges. Up Pit Lane, it's a dead end. Yeah. Right, so I'll text them.
The consumption of 3 minuscule fairy cakes and 3 further cups of lukewarm stewed tea concluded the tasty, if rather sparse meal. Poor old thing, she did do her best. Small talk had run its course. The conversation gradually dried up, leaving long and slightly embarrassing pauses, causing a small amount of tension. During one silence, Joyce looked up through the window, narrow kitchen you see, wood table here, bird cage on the table, eating at the table with the bird cage. During one second, Joyce looked up through the window and eased the tension with a slow and easy Nice parakeet, said Gary. We call it a budgerigar, said Simeon. Said Auntie Joyce. Suddenly, the bright, clean, surprised tinkle of a bell. To the rescue came Joey. All eyes turned on the little budgie, who cleverly rang his bell and provided a delightful distraction. "Hello, Joey. Are you showing off, Joey? Joey, Joey, Joey," repeated the delighted Auntie Joyce. She pushed her face up close to the cage and pursed her lips to make a kissing sound, which both revolted and annoyed Gary. For the benefit of his hostess, he tried to maintain a half smile to suggest his pleasure at such charming behaviour, but was further aggravated when his mischievous friend, that's me, said, "Joey, Joey, Joey, look at Joey, Gary." "I can see Joey," said Gary, through his teeth. They were all rewarded by a single chirp, a cocked head on one side, and a second peck of the bell. At that moment, the show became really interesting when Joey did his party trick. He put his little head under the bell to give the appearance of wearing a hat. Auntie Joyce twittered and chuckled. "Oh, put your hat on, Joey. Joey, Joey, Joey. Look, Simeon, Joey's got his hat on. Joey, Joey, Joey," and so on. Now then, okay, back to Claude Holier. We've not done this, have we? Yeah, we've done this. We've done this, haven't we? I've done the, this is, yes, well, that's it. Oh, we're getting through it. This book was published, which is January the 1st, 2006. Nobody liked him. He was an utterly peculiar little man that used to sort of talk like this. And but I liked him because he was so, I don't know, how can you say, it's awfully difficult. I liked him. I felt he was a victim of life, and he was really despised by a lot of people. It's certainly the Derby Camp and the Nottingham Camp wouldn't touch him with a barge pole. They loathed him. And I found him interesting, I really did. I called him Mr. Toad for the book. He didn't mind. Jasper sent me a solicitor's letter, but Paul, his real name was Paul Sharpley, he didn't mind at all. Mr. Toad, the sight of Mr. Toad, the first sight was never to be forgotten. Yes, certainly a toad. The pupils of the last 10 years have christened him well. He looked like a toad. His exuberant, bulging eyes, full of ardour, were set wide over a tight mouth which seemed more like a cracked pie. He inspired something of the revulsion, the aversion felt at the nearness of a reptile. Like Graham's Mr. Toad, he was a comical, eager, impatient, and entirely puffed up with his own importance. Catching sight of the three visitors, the little creature actually ran over to the door. He registered a childlike delight that somebody had come to call. There were three of us, actually. Dolly he recognised immediately. Betty he ignored. And Simeon, being forced to retreat several steps, was all but physically consumed on the spot. "Oh, hello, what's your name, little boy?" Simeon's retreat was of no avail. An avid toad-faced was pushed up hard against his own, causing him to suffer an assault of foul breath. The interrogation rapidly continued, so rapidly indeed that the boy couldn't find a gap in which to make a response. Dolly came to the rescue, calming the atmosphere with soft sibilance. Little fat Dolly, she took me everywhere in a car. "He's my new friend, his name's Simeon. And this is Betty, the entertainer, the one I was telling you about." Toad's enthusiasm collapsed as quickly as it had originally exploded. He slunk back slightly, being forced by common civility to note the presence of an ugly old queen. An ugly old queen he knew well. The term is familiar stranger. Mr. Toad was slightly embarrassed during this moment, the moment of having to meet formally and speak to Betty, familiar strangers. They'd met before, often as rivals at the Derby Turkish baths, at some notorious toilets. They met frequently in Belper's King Street. But the respectable schoolmaster, Toad was a schoolmaster, had studiously avoided eye contact and conscientiously avoided any social situation which, God forbid, might risk an exchange of words with a well-known homosexual. Toad didn't want anyone to think that he was like that. It's always been in the nature of many gay men that they think nobody knows. Everybody knew about Mr. Toad. The staff of the Derby Turkish baths, they all knew. Toilet attendants knew. The congregation of Christ Church, where he'd been the organist since 1937, they knew. The shopkeepers on King Street, they knew. The staff and the more perceptive pupils of the Herbert Strutt Grammar School, they knew. Toad was not only effeminate, he was also odd. He was a funny little man with goggling toad eyes who, unable to maintain discipline in the classroom, suffered the chronic pain of the daily assault on his dignity. Girls were especially cruel. Toad. Good to see Betsy, Betty. And to my horror, Dolly said, "Well, I'd like to use your toilet, Betty." "Oh, you know where it is, in the yard. Go up there, up garden." So his ample form ponderously moved through a primitive creaking door. And as that happened, the ugly old queen stood up and came over and sat down very close to Simeon. In fact, too close, much too close to Simeon on that sofa. So close that he felt his flesh crawl with utter revulsion, and then it happened. Ooh, I bet you're a big lad. This as his hand dropped on the boy's thigh and groped further in and further up. Simeon quickly disengaged, jumped up and took shelter behind the sofa. "Don't be like that. Let's have a feel," said the Queen in a manoeuvring, scheming tone, now prowling to the back of the settee, hand outstretched all ready for his intended rude grope. At the point where the predator, stalking clockwise, had reached the back of the obstacle, the prey had retreated. The prey had retreated back to the front. For a moment there was a standoff. The chicken stood his ground, eyeing the harpy. For harpy it was. The dame had become a loathsome, voracious monster with a harridan's head. Outstretched hands were threatening like talons. "Oh, don't be shy. Come on here. Let's have a feel. Let's see what you've got." He continued clockwise. So did Simeon. Betsy's Betty increased his speed. So did Simeon. The scene became ludicrous, rather like the Keystone Cops. The pursued chicken could almost hear the urgent tinkling of a piano, allegro, after the style of an old silent film with increasing tempo. When the evil villain is chasing a distressed maid, round and round, faster and faster, until it stopped. Dolly was back in the room. Now, boys, dignity." Looking at them. A silence descended as they looked to the bar and tuned in to Mr. Hoadley, who was addressing his admiring audience and nodding heads. Yes, Clark, yes. Hoadley's right, of course. In refined tones of royalty, he had just finished denouncing the new floating pirate radio stations as an affront to good taste, and was now bemoaning the annual summer mayhem caused by beach battles between mobs and rockers. Simeon became mesmerised by the ornate body language of this pretentious troupe of elegant Derby queens, moving about, parading, vaunting, reinforcing their social superiority with every sickening gesture. Hands on hips, small dainty steps, all nodding heads appeared to be smiling, sneering, progressing slowly in an etiquette-laden mince across that floor, accentuating their social position. In Hilary Raymond Hawley alone, HRH, he had never seen a more affected, effeminate man. This scruffy chicken, a one-time fully paid-up member of macho youth, a one-time mate of solid working-class lads who marched across Heanor Marketplace with gritty gait, was utterly repelled when the big, soft Hawley emitted an aristocratic giggle, flourished his silk handkerchief and seemed to make an elaborate bow to his lord and master, the great Hoadley. It was all so artificial, so formal, so well arranged, so well choreographed. Now then, what did it remind him of? He'd seen all this before somewhere. The scruffy chicken was trying to think recently where, and then it came to him. Marie Antoinette. He'd recently seen the 1938 film Marie Antoinette starring Norma Shearer, a film full of toffs and fops, full of the exaggerated stylised elegance of 18th century France. Of course it was a minuet. It was the one scene which really revolted Simeon. One scene was against the backdrop of obscene opulence, the gilded splendour of Versailles, when all these pampered ponces began to move in the most affected manner, a slow, stately dance, here and now, the Darby Camp. And Mr. Toad didn't like Nobby the Gnome. Mr. Toad didn't like Nobby the Gnome because Mr. Toad was very, Mr. Toad was jealous of people who had to work hard for a living, people who didn't have to work hard for a living, because Paul, Mr. Toad, his real name, his name was Paul, he was very angry when people collected benefits and things like that. He felt that they should be working. And Nobby the Gnome had a great time. And here he's going on about it. He's nothing better than a sewer rat. He sleeps in public lavatories. There's pillows and blankets in that bag. It's a different cottage every night. So he's first in the morning, first to catch the cream, lives on it, bright and breezy. Oh yes, Nobby's got it all worked out. The police. Oh, he's a tramp, interrupted the toad with scorn. What do the police care? Tramps get away with it. Nobby the gnome gets more sex than anybody. I have to face those horrible girls who plague me every day, day in, day out night, and Nobby's having sex all day, every day. He's been doing it and getting away with it since the First World War. There's me, stretched to a frazzle, and there's him, man after man, all bloody day long. It makes you sick. Nobby should be made to work. Mr. Wilson should do something about people like that bone-idle bugger. Listen here, Simeon, if you listen to me, listen good. Don't go back to America. Sign on for the National Assistant. Find a good cottage. Sit in it. Stay in it. Enjoy a stress-free life and you'll live to a ripe old age like that idle bastard over there. Are you listening to me? Simeon was listening and shaking with laughter. Mr. Toad continued. Look at the prat now. Just look at him, stashing away his pennies in that filthy old bag. Nobby the Noble just dances with people and they give him pennies afterwards. That's it, that's all he's got. Everything in that disgusting old sack. He carries it about on his back. He goes from cottage to cottage with that thing on his back. He can live off next to nothing because folks give him things. There's always a crust for Nobby. Any else, if he's daft, silly, bloody, stupid dance. With further amusement, Simeon noted that such flame and fury and the grip of strong emotion, Mr. Pod's accent had a tendency to deteriorate and to regress to its original Derbyshire. Oh yes, he continued with vehement sarcasm. No work for our Nobby. Oh no, nice easy life for Nobby. Stupid little turd. Oh, Mr. Toad, I call him Aubrey Pod in the book, but I keep saying Mr. Toad to make it simple for the listeners. He came to an abrupt halt. His young friend's laughter had ceased. The smiling expression had turned to a look of sheer horror. The eyes of Simeon were fixed on two other eyes. They had met two hideous eyes. They were old, grey, leering eyes, like the eyes of dead fish. Cold, no warmth. These ghastly eyes were sunken into a face which was like something out of a nightmare. The boy was bayoneted to the spot. He was held in a hypnotic fascination by penetrating, lascivious eyeballs, deeply set in a leathery, gnarled countenance which could have been part of the rough bark of an ancient oak. And surely this ancient man, must be as old as any old oak. His large hawk nose, complete with ugly warts and blackheads, was worthy of anything which could have been penned by the brothers Grimm. And indeed it was grim. The mouth, which at the present time had teeth, seemed not to have teeth. It was a slash. It was a mouth which was more accustomed to being toothless. Just as Simeon recognised Nobby, so now he knew that he was in the leering presence of the famous Belper Goblin, Gashpo Vermill, no less. And in an instant he knew the reason why the revolting Betsy's Betty was called a hag, and this freak of nature was referred to as a crone.